As I wait here to die, I sit here, writing a diary of sorts. Maybe it will be more of a confessional. I'm not sure. In a couple of hours, the disease will take me, and I will become one of them. My name is Charles Roberts, and I have conceded my life to death. I will take whatever action I can to ensure that I do not cause anyone else's death afterward. I remember the day the outbreak started. It was just a few weeks ago. It happened so quickly. I was sitting in the wheelchair, looking out the window, having a cup of coffee. Amy Thompson, from down the block, was walking her dog. I was admiring her form. She was a very beautiful woman. I wanted her. I could spend the day daydreaming about her. She was married, though, yet that didn't change what I felt for her, or my desires to be with her. Besides, I was married too, 20 years now, and I did love Amanda. But ever since the accident, our lives have been a wreck. I turned on the TV. The news was on, droning on about the pandemic again. It was getting tiresome. They were calling for more lockdowns. More people than ever before were getting sick. Now, I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I'm sure our government has something to do with it. Or at least some other powerful entity has. I hear how the rich want to depopulate the world. How are they going to accomplish that unless they bring on some deadly virus, right? Well, here we are, fighting for our lives again. The last pandemic didn't kill us all, so they are coming at us with round 2. And this virus is far more dangerous than the last one. Not having much practice with the wheelchair, I strolled around the room doing donuts in the middle of the floor, then rolled back to the window. Amy was already gone, so there was nothing more to look at. The news droned on in the background. My wife would be waking up soon, and I wasn't really in the mood to deal with her today. I heard Amanda stirring in bed. It was a matter of minutes now. I finished my coffee and continued to look out the window. The news was too much for me, and I shut it off. The bell rang. I ignored it and continued to stare out the window, trying to form Amy in my mind. God, I needed a break from all this. The bell rang again.
Charlie, are you there, sweetheart?
Yeah, I'm coming, Amanda, I called back. I stood up and began to push the wheelchair to her room, setting my empty cup on the counter. I took one last look out the window and sighed. After getting her up and going for the day, I wheeled her out into the living room. She looked up at me.
What do you want for breakfast?
She asked.
I could go for an omelet. I know it's one of your favorites.
Then I guess an omelet it will be, I said, already feeling exhausted, trying my best not to show it. I made my way to the kitchen and began the process of making her breakfast. I thought to myself that every morning I wake up and begin the process of living this dull and listless life. Day after day, year after year, what joy was there to be had? At the end of the day, I will go to bed alone and miserable.
Honey, I can't find the remote. When you get a second, can you find it for me?
Amanda asked.
Or better yet, wheel me into the kitchen and we can watch TV together while you make breakfast.
I walked out, spotting it, and handed the remote to her. I don't want to watch that shit right now, I said, and walked back into the kitchen. I knew I had upset her, but I couldn't take the news anymore. I heard the TV come to life and heard the news droning on and on again. I began cooking the eggs, but the only thing I could think about was Mrs. Thompson. I needed a woman. I needed sex. I needed a life. It's been 3 years since Amanda has been crippled, paralyzed from the waist down. That makes for dull sex. She would never feel anything down there ever again, and it was more of a chore for me than there was any pleasure in it. Amanda shouted for me from the living room. I ran in to see what happened. She was pointing at the TV.
Oh my God!
She said.
Look, Charlie.
I came around to see what she was pointing at, but they had already gone to commercial. What's going on? I asked, beginning to walk back to the kitchen. I had eggs to attend to.
Oh my God.
She said again.
The news reporter at the hospital was attacked.
Attacked, I said.
Yes, he was attacked by one of the patients.
She said, her eyes wide with confusion.
They went to commercial right after. Charlie, people are going crazy over this pandemic.
I hollered from the kitchen. I told you, you shouldn't be watching the news. You don't need that shit in your head. I flipped the eggs, wiping the sweat from my brow. You should turn off the TV, I said, getting frustrated. After a few minutes of commercials, the news was back on.
They're back, but the news anchors aren't saying anything about it. Just that he'll be okay.
And he probably will, I said. I walked in the living room and turned off the TV, then wheeled her into the kitchen. Amanda insisted on having the news on. Not once did they go back to the other reporter. Not once did they talk to any reporter out in the field.
What's going on?
Amanda asked.
They're not telling us something. I saw that attack. That patient was biting the hell out of the reporter.
Probably some half-cock idiot on some fucking mind-altering drugs. You remember that bath salt stuff, don't you? I answered. I could see the worry in her face, and I was too exhausted to deal with it. I turned off the TV. She still looked up at it every now and then, maybe replaying the news in her head. Let's have a no-news day today, I suggested. It's too much negative shit right now, and I don't want to be stressed all day, okay? She looked up at the blank TV and turned to me and said, okay. We finished our breakfast with barely a word spoken, but that was pleasant. I needed peace and quiet. My boss hog was throbbing in my pants, and I would have to deal with that soon. That was the nickname my wife gave it the first time we made love. As soon as breakfast was over and the dishes were done, I planned on some private time in the bedroom to take care of my desires, but I never got that chance. After breakfast, Amanda had other ideas. I didn't get to take care of my throbbing problem. Instead, we played the board game Monopoly. I wasn't into it, and I don't think she was either.
You thinking about the news?
She asked, leaning back in her chair. She was combing her hair with her fingers to set it in a ponytail. I didn't want to tell her I was thinking about my throbbing hog, because then she'll want to give me a mercy fuck, and I didn't want to have to go through all that. So, I said yes, I was thinking about the news. I reminded her. Later this week she had an appointment, and we might want to consider bringing our masks. If the news can be regarded as truth anymore, and I believe much of it is just propaganda, then it would look like we hadn't seen the worst of this new virus yet. By the time we cleaned up and put away the board game, it was almost 11. Amy would be walking her dog again soon. I needed some joy in my life, and watching Amy would give me an ounce of joy, and I needed that. I suggested that we sit out on the front porch and get a little sun for a while. She agreed, and I wheeled her out.
It is nice out today,
Amanda said. I looked down the walk and could barely make out the image of Amy coming up the road. Yes, it is, I said. Boss Hog was waking up again, squirming around in my pants. Amy wears next to nothing, and that is perfectly fine with me. What she wears is tight, form-fitting clothes, leaving almost nothing to the imagination. Hell, Superman wouldn't even need to use his X-ray vision in our day and age. As she got closer, some guy ran up to her and grabbed her. They fought, falling to the ground. We heard her scream. I jumped up, thinking to help. My wife put her hand on mine, holding it. Amy got back up. She began to run again. Her dog ran in the opposite direction, its leash trailing behind. She continued to scream. The man was also back up and chasing her again.
Get in the house,
Amanda said. Her voice cracked, and her eyes went wide.
Charlie, I'm scared. Get into the house.
She began to wheel herself towards the door. I looked at Amanda. Amy was running up the street on the other side. I went to the sidewalk towards Amy. Amanda, get inside and grab the gun. I'll try to get her attention and bring her here. I yelled and waved my arms to get Amy's attention. The guy was beginning to catch up to her. I could hear Amanda whimpering inside the house.
I can't find the damn keys to the lockbox, Charlie.
She yelled. Amy spotted me and changed her direction towards me. She looked back and saw that he was catching up to her, and she screamed some more. The man fell, thank God. It gave Amy some more time. He wasn't down long, though. He rolled his way back up and was chasing her again. I saw that Amy was getting tired and began to slow down. She looked back and saw he was coming again, and she dug deep into her soul and picked up her speed. She was closer now, but as she turned to look, she tripped over the sprinkler head just across the street. By the time she got back up, he was on her again. They both hit the ground. She began screaming to help her. She just got back to her feet when I made it to her. I threw a huge punch to the man's face. He faltered backwards and fell back onto the ground. I grabbed Amy's hand and pulled her along with me. The man was already getting up and coming at us again, seeming to be unfazed by my punch. We ran up the steps and I was able to close and lock the door before he ran full body into it. He bounced off, but then immediately came at it again, hammering the door with his fists, while making this awful guttural sound that sounded like he was trying to talk, but all that came out was growls and grunts. Amy held on to me, her shirt torn. Her one breast was partially exposed, brushed up against me. Amanda wheeled herself back in from the bedroom holding the gun. I took the gun from her. Amy then went to Amanda, and they held each other. Amy was crying, and Amanda joined her soon after. I held the gun up and looked back at the girls. I saw that her nipple was hard on her plump breast before she covered it with her arms. The man was still beating on the door, but he was beginning to slow. After a few minutes, he stopped, thankfully, becoming exhausted. All we could hear was his grunting. What the hell was going on? I kept thinking about the news. I kept thinking about the pandemic. Amanda and Amy were freaking out, but they were starting to calm down. Both were taking deep breaths. Amanda handed her one of my t-shirts that we had folded the night before. I slapped my forehead, remembering what I needed to do, what I should have done from the start, and picked up the phone. It was dead, no dial tone. I ran to my room, picked up my cell phone, and dialed the police. Your call can't be completed right now. Please try your call again later. That was all I got. The girls were in the kitchen making coffee, trying to calm themselves. I went back to the door, gun raised. The grunting stopped. I peeked out the window, and I saw the guy walking away, except he walked very funny, almost ape-like. Amanda picked up the phone this time. It was still dead. When I saw that he was gone from my sight, I went into the kitchen. My wife had to have seen the way I looked at Amy. She was wearing one of my t-shirts, and it made it look like she wasn't wearing anything underneath it. Amanda turned on the news. There was nothing but static and white noise. They both began to panic again. I was beginning to panic myself. I set the gun on the table, poured myself a cup of coffee. A few minutes later, an emergency message came up on the TV telling everyone to stay indoors. The message repeated every few minutes until it went off the air again. I was beginning to suspect it was the virus that was causing people to act so rabid and attack others. What have they done? This is genocide, I thought. Amanda was helping Amy to dress up the wound she'd gotten. Amy's entire body was shaking. Her eyes stared blankly. Her mind looked empty. I believed she was going into shock. Amanda shook too, but had been able to clean her wound. I saw it happen, and I was able to catch her when she fell. Amy passed out. I picked her up and placed her in my bed. I couldn't help but smell the faint scent of perfume and her sweat as I laid her down. Her skin was warm against mine. I didn't want to let her go. I pulled the blanket over her and touched the side of her cheek. Back in the kitchen, Amanda looked confused, watching the blank TV while holding the gun.
What are we going to do, Charlie?
She said. looking at me.
Everyone's going crazy out there. What if that man comes back?
I bent down to her and took the gun from her. I held her as she buried her face into my chest and wept. I did love her. I did. I loved her even more just then. I held her tight until the emergency signal came back on the TV. After hearing the same message repeat itself several times, I turned it off. It was beginning to get dark, and though neither Amanda nor I were hungry, we forced a sandwich and some chips down. I went in to look at how Amy was doing, and she was still out. Her breathing was becoming labored. There was dried blood on the sheets where her wound seeped through. I sat down beside her and put the back of my hand to her forehead. She had no fever, although she did feel a little clammy. She still, however, looked beautiful despite the trauma she had endured today. I felt a twinge in my lower region that agreed, yes, she was beautiful. Amanda's bed was in the other room. It was motorized with lifts and pulleys to help me get her in and out of bed, but she didn't want to sleep in there tonight. She wanted me to help her onto the couch. I did, and I slept on the floor beside her, her arm reaching out and resting on me for comfort. During the night, I woke up hearing a car crash. It sounded like it was just a few hundred feet down the street. That sound not only woke me up, but it also woke up the memory of our accident 3 years ago. As I crept up to the window to look out, in my mind I rewatched our own accident. I was driving. I looked over at Amanda for just a second, and when I looked back up, the light was already red. I couldn't stop. A driver from the east lane hit the passenger side, where Amanda sat at full speed and T-boned us. Amanda was pushed, squished, and pinned in the car. I barely came away with a scratch. Amanda came away with only half of herself. The driver of the other car had been intoxicated, and he died on the scene. With no witnesses, the drunk, dead driver took the fall. Amanda, or anyone else for that matter, would never know that I ran the red light. That I am the one who caused her to be half of what she was. The drunk dead man had nothing left to lose. Luck was on my side that night. Shaking the vision away, I looked out the window and couldn't see anything. It was an especially dark night. I heard Amy cough from my bedroom. As I went to look at her, I realized it seemed darker out tonight because the streetlights hadn't come on yet. I wondered if they ever would. I passed by Amanda. She was still asleep. In my room, Amy was just starting to sit up. I turned on the lights. She looked at me, and she started weeping. At first, she fought it back, but as I sat down beside her, she let it go. She held me tight, her tears dripping on me. I reached around her to hold her, and my hand grazed her breast. Her nipples, hard and erect. She leaned in, grabbing me tighter, and continued to sob. After a few minutes, her hand relaxed and drifted, resting on my inner thigh. My manhood began to throb, almost like a heartbeat. Her hand slowly slid up, almost touching me. I felt a light press of the lips on my neck, and my heart started racing. My pants were bulging, and like that scene in Alien, where that creature broke out of the man's body, mine was trying to break out now. My hand reached down under her shirt, and I cupped her breast. They were warm and rigid. Our mouths were slowly moving towards each other, so slow as wanting to deny the action, but also unable to resist it. My lip touched hers, her hand feeling the alien in my pants. It needed to come out. She needed it to come out. From my wife's bedroom, a window shattered. We were shocked out of my dream. We both got up and ran into the hall. Amanda had just risen and already was trying to get into her wheelchair. I saw something in her eyes just then, and I didn't want to continue to make eye contact. I rushed to her room while Amy went to help Amanda get her into the chair. The window was broken. I saw someone slowly rise just on the other side of her bed. He looked like death. His face was torn, and pieces of flesh hung down. Blood dripped from his lips. His eyes looked evil as he turned towards me. He tried to talk, but it was a low growl. He charged. I slammed the door. I held it closed and screamed for the girls to get to the car. The thing on the other side hammered at the door. Why won't he just turn the knob? I thought, still holding it closed. I let go of the door and watched it as that thing banged and banged at it. I remembered the gun that was in the kitchen. I ran to grab it. The girls were frantic. Neither could do anything other than panic. Amanda was at least in her chair. I yelled for Amy to get into the car, and I tossed her the keys. The noise, that awful noise. Amy ran out, but Amanda was making enough noise for the both of them. I heard the SUV start. I grabbed Amanda's chair and began to pull her backwards. That thing had now busted through the door and had already spotted us. I jerked Amanda's chair towards the door. She was looking into the face of the monster. I was almost there. We were almost out. I don't know why I did what I did. I don't know if I just didn't think I would make it, or if I had other reasons. But what I did next haunts me even now as I write this. I pushed her chair back in. Then I closed the door. She began to scream, a blood-curdling scream. I screamed from the gut, through tears and heartache. I screamed. I stood there a moment, my head down, and I left her there. Out of gas, 20 or so miles away from home, Amy and I found a vacant home to stay in. She never asked what happened to Amanda. She probably figured that it was better this way anyway. Amanda would only slow us down. Amanda would always be the weakest link. For about a week after, everything was good. There was plenty of food in the house. Those creatures, or zombies, as Amy would call them, were getting slower. And, as long as we stayed quiet, we felt we were safe. It would seem that the more recent dead were faster, and as they started to decay, the slower they became. My dreams did come true. We were banging each other, 2, sometimes 3 times a day. I was happy again. Then Amy started to get sick. She thought she was going to become one of those things. The wound on her arm, now an infection, festered. She wanted me to shoot her. I couldn't do it, and I didn't then, but after she turned and attacked me, I put a bullet in her head. She fell, and just like that, she and her beauty were gone. So, now here I am writing down my diary of confessions. I suppose that is what it really is. My own wounds are now festering. It is only a matter of time now. I can't possibly think of shooting myself in the head. I can't go out with a bang. I'll just leave that to someone else.